I'm Scott Ott with Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, and this is Right Angle. And gentlemen, it's exciting. You know, we just got through the congressional midterm elections, so we can take a deep breather and just breathe in some 2020 air.
No,
doesn't that feel good?
Oh, I hate you so much right now, Scott Ott.
Well, you know, welcome to my world. You know, gentlemen, President Trump announced a long time ago. I mean, you got to admire this guy. Like, he's just kind of getting his legs under him in the presidency when he immediately announces, I like this job. I think I'll do it again. And he said he's going to run again. So what's happened this time is they're going to do some restructuring of how the presidential campaign runs. And in effect, the President Trump's political campaign is taking over the RNC's presidential campaign activities. In the past, there has been some, you know, kind of friendly coordination, and you know, the candidate's campaign does some stuff, and the RNC does some stuff. But in this case, everything is going to be coordinated and amalgamated and literally brought under one roof. Bill Whittle, we hired a businessman for president, and it sounds like he's going in and not just shaking things up, but also getting his ducks in a row in preparation for a campaign that's probably going to be unlike any other we've seen in a whole new world of social media. Do you think this is a smart idea for not just for the Trump campaign to merge with the RNC, but to essentially say, we're taking it from here, boys?
Well, presumably there's going to be a lot of "you're fireds." And this causes me an enormous anxiety attack, the idea of losing the razor-sharp minds in the RNC that have fought so brilliantly to provide the message that we all defend and put it into the mouths and campaign platforms of our candidates. I don't see how we'll possibly survive without that kind of expertise. You know, and I mean, I just would like to just go back and just almost just re-say what I just said. There has been an astonishing inability of the RNC to forget individual messages for candidates, to tell people what the hell we're about. You know, it's just they can't seem to do it. They don't know how. And I suspect the reason is because that if you end up in the RNC, it's because you're a politician. And if you're a politician, you're in Washington to make change. And that means you're a Democrat. And the idea of being in Washington to limit the power of everybody is anathema to them. So I think that's why the RNC ends up being in this kind of, you know, this kind of stuck in neutral place where it's supposed to represent the party of people who think that government should be smaller and less powerful, and it's filled with people who think that the government should be larger and more powerful. And that's probably why they can't get the message out. It may be that I used to think that they didn't understand it. Now I just think that, and then I thought for a while maybe it just embarrassed them, but I think I've come to realize that the entire essence of conservatism is it's like the axe is going to fall, you know, on their jobs. It's like talking up the robots that are going to come and replace you. So, hey, I don't know. I don't see how I'm serious in terms of messaging. I don't see how things could be worse. I really don't. And if Donald Trump brings a fighting edge to the RNC, we've said this so many times. I don't like living in this age. It does not make me happy. It doesn't make me comfortable or proud. None of those things. But when you've got the kind of headwind we have with education, indoctrination, and media bias and pop culture bias and all the rest, it's time to get some people who know how to punch effectively, because we don't get a chance to punch that often.
For whatever else you say about the rookie candidate's first run for president, and, you know, when I say rookie candidate, he'd never run for anything.
Never been elected.
Anything.
Yes. So not only not elected, he's never even sought office. Not bad for your first try. But I think, Bill, you made me think of the fact that sort of the Republicans tend to focus on, you know, what we stand for, what we believe, and they have this sort of whole operation to do messaging. Donald Trump had a series of catchphrases that you would chant at a rally.
Well, but this is the beauty of the philosophy. The beauty of the philosophy is that it's not based on the, you know, on the material dialectic, and you don't have to have read, 400 pages of Lenin to begin to understand the theory. It's like, leave us alone. don't hurt anybody, don't take their stuff, do what you say you're going to do. And they can't comprehend that. They cannot. All we ever hear from the RNC is policy positions. Mostly we hear about how bad things like Obamacare are and stuff, because they are bad. But we don't hear Obamacare is bad and terrible, and here's why, this would be better. Because if we did that, we'd be winning every election we ever had. So I say, let's just put another million different monkeys in those million different typewriters and see if something else comes out. Because frankly, this gang is not cranking out what I was hoping for.
Now, Stephen Green, in the past, some of us have been critical of the Democrats for essentially squelching competition on their side. In fact, Hillary Clinton's campaign, in coordination with leaders at the DNC, essentially tried to crush Bernie Sanders. Yeah. And the Republicans have often been applauded for the fact that we are not only a big tent, but we like competition. So we had 17 presidential candidates, at one point the last time around. In this case, with the president's campaign teaming up and taking over the RNC's presidential operation, that seems to me would effectively squelch any, ascendant candidates who decided that they wanted to challenge the president for that. It happened in Pennsylvania a number of years ago that Tom Corbett was running for governor, and somebody challenged him, and the state committee chairman stood up at one point and said how he looked forward to us all rallying together with Tom Corbett. And he said this during the primaries, and this was considered an outrage. And a lot of the people who had backed that other candidate not only got ticked off at him in the primary process, but then pulled out when it came to the general election and just said, screw you, there's no real choice here. Do you think that we run the risk of that at the national level with the RNC subsuming itself like this?
You raise a good point. It's a legitimate concern. Ronald Reagan, back in, I think, 1986, his daughter Patty, I think it was running for the GOP Senate nomination in one of the Carolinas. My memory's a little hazy on this one. If I'd have known we were talking about this, or if I'd have thought about this earlier, I would have looked it up. But Reagan refused, as the president and the de facto party head, to endorse his own daughter in the primary. So he didn't think it was the president's job to choose the candidates for the people who actually make up the party. That's very smart politics. On the other hand,
it's actual character is what it is.
Yes, it is. On the other hand, if George H.W. Bush had had the opportunity to squelch Pat Buchanan before New Hampshire in 1992, he might have won a second term. So, yeah, we're looking forward to a risk here that we don't yet know exists. Maybe Trump's just trying to put together a single efficient organization, which is something that, let's face it, the Republicans have never had. P.J. O'Rourke, back before he got all Trump derangement syndrome, was probably the funniest living humorist in America, at least through the 90s. And he said the Republicans are the party that tells you the government doesn't work, and then they get elected and prove it. And the problem... And the problem we face time and time again, as we saw in November, is actually getting elected. Here we were. 2018 was a huge boom year. We had a couple of quarters of a really solid GDP growth like we haven't seen since before the Great Recession and Obama's new old deal response to it, and all the rest. And there's something else going on here that makes me think I want to give Trump the benefit of the doubt. The Republican Party, in some good ways and some less good ways, is being remade. It's becoming more populist. It's becoming more working man, more so than it ever has been. Even when Reagan, had his Reagan Democrats, his blue-collar Democrats, putting him into the White House 2 times. And this transformation is incomplete. And as long as this huge fracture remains, the party is going to be in a very troubled spot. And I think what Trump is doing, if this is a serious reorg effort at the top, in at least some ways is going to try and heal that rift, at least as far as messaging and organization go. And I think that's definitely a positive. As for your concerns, Scott, I think they're legitimate. But that's looking down the road a little further than we need to look just yet. Let's see how it rolls out over the next year or two before we get too worried about it.
I wouldn't mind if they got rid of people who would say things like, you know, if it came down to the deep state or the Trump state, I'd rather have the deep state.
Yeah,
those
that
kind
was
of
Bill
conservatives,
Kristol, by the way, yeah.
Yes, those kind of conservatives I don't particularly need.
Yeah.
Well, and we should pause for a moment of silence to mourn the passing of Bill Kristol's magazine, The Weekly Standard, which is shutting down this week. Okay, that's enough. So, you know, ladies and gentlemen, I've always been a fan of competition in almost every realm because I think it breeds excellence. I think it gives people an opportunity to sharpen their skills. I think it draws together coalitions of people in a common effort, and it makes the people who are the losers, if you have a fair competition, it makes the losers feel like they had their shot and now it's time to move on unified, you know, and not to trivialize it too much and make it just like an athletic competition, but you know, I've kind of always wanted the team that beat my team to win the Super Bowl. You know, that's the one I root for.
Even Florida State,
even though in the playoff game I hated them. You know.
Yeah.
So that is, I think there's value in what has become the American primary election process because it brings out a range of voices. It gives the eventual nominee an opportunity to hear what the messages are that are resonating with the people. You know, if a John Kasich rises up and there are a handful of people who respond to a particular aspect of his message, even though they reject him overall, it might be useful for him to be able to incorporate those ideas into his campaign. And I'm sorry I used that example. He was the one who was quoted in the article as saying that this is a sham. But I think that it is not helpful to President Trump in his ultimate campaign to essentially seize power now, and if it does wind up shutting out competition, I don't think that's a good thing overall for the party. I think we need to have that periodically, and I think it makes him vulnerable. That said, the guy has changed the game. And so all bets of past campaigns are off. We have no idea how this thing are going to run. One of our members shared with me recently a video from a guy who was running Trump's social media campaign. And this guy was a brilliant strategist who knew exactly what he was doing. He was being interviewed by some major media, journalist, and just rattling off, just absolutely deadpanning all his answers. Well, here's what we were doing. We were doing it for this reason. This is what, like you get the sense that Trump's organization is chaotic. This guy was an absolute strategic genius, and he knew exactly what they were doing and why they were doing it and why it was working. And I have a feeling that that's going to help the RNC. Now, what remains of the RNC after the election, whether President Trump wins another term or fails to win another term, is something that I think that they need to engage in a little succession planning now to be prepared for either eventuality. For Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making Right Angle possible.